Hi, my name is Sophia Trantham. I'm a senior and a double major in criminal justice and psychology. I decided to merge both of my fields of study together to create this thesis, Social Media's Silent Threat, Mental Wellbeing, Deviant Behavior, and Cybercrime Victimization. This is a correlational study. The purpose of my study is to investigate correlations between social media usage and mental well-being, deviant behavior, and cybercrime victimization. I am also increasing the awareness for the negative relationships between social media and these variables. For my literature review, I found that social media misuse increases the prevalence of depression, negatively impacts social relationships and academic performances, increases crime rates, and also increases cybercrime victimization. I also found that many medical professionals lack the awareness of the negative relationship between social media and mental health. I hypothesized that higher social media usage correlates negatively with mental well-being and positively with engagement in deviant behavior and cybercrime victimization. For my methods, I had 43 participants from Psychology 101 and Criminal Justice 101 courses. The average participant was male, 19 and a half years old, and white. I asked participants to turn on their screen time tracking a week prior to the survey to ensure that there was a full week of data to pull from. A week later, participants filled out a 73-question survey on Qualtrics. They were informed ahead of time that everything would be anonymous. For my variables of interest, I had screen time and social media use data that was collected from the screen time tracking on cell phones. I collected the total and daily averages along with the top used social media apps. To measure social media disorders, I used a social media disorder scale with questions such as often felt bad when you could not use social media. To measure mental well-being, I used the Short-Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Well-Being Scale with questions such as I've had energy to spare. To measure cybercrime, I used the Online Victimization Scale, which is broken into 4 parts: general, sexual, individual racism, and vicarious racism, with questions such as I have been harassed or bothered online for no apparent reason, and I have received unwanted sexual spam, emails, or messages. Vicarious racism can be defined as a secondhand exposure to racial discrimination and/or prejudice directed at another individual. For the final scale I used the Deviant Behavior Variety Scale to measure deviant behavior, with questions such as been to school or class after drinking alcohol. For my results, I found many significant correlations at Brevard College. For my first result, I found that well-being is negatively correlated with social media disorders. We can see this on the top graph labeled the relationship between mental well-being and social media disorder. The x-axis is the social media disorder scale, whereas the y-axis is the mental well-being scale. When scores on the social media disorder scale increased, the scores on the mental well-being scale decreased. The second finding I have is that online victimization is positively correlated with social media disorders. We can see this on the graph on the bottom, labeled the relationship between cybercrime victimization and social media disorder. The x-axis is the social media disorder scale, whereas the y-axis is the online victimization scale. As Brevard College participant scores on the social media disorder scale increased, scores on the online victimization scale also increased. I also found significant correlations between social media disorder and each of the domains of the online victimization scale, including general victimization, sexual victimization, individual racial discrimination, and vicarious racial discrimination. I also found that experiencing online victimization is negatively correlated with well-being. Unfortunately, I had no significant findings between higher social media screen time and increased engagement in deviant behavior. Some more results I found is that at Brevard College, the daily average on social media was 3.6 hours. The most used social media app was TikTok with a daily average of 2.1 hours. The daily average screen time was 6.48 hours, and the weekly amount of time spent on social media was 19.5 hours. The weekly amount of screen time was 35.7 hours. So the average student is spending a full day each week on their screens. In conclusion, I found that problematic social media use has a negative correlation with mental well-being and increases cybercrime victimization. For some future implications and limitations I had a small sample size. I believe with a bigger sample size, I would have found significant findings between higher social media screen time and increased engagement in deviant behavior. This was also limited to screen time on just cell phones. I believe if we had opened it up to computers, laptops, TVs, video games, tablets, etc., there would have been bigger results. This was also a self-report survey, so students may not have read questions thoroughly, or they may not have felt inclined to answer questions truthfully on the deviant behavior variety scale. Despite these limitations, my results showed strong evidence that social media use is problematic and negatively impacting Brevard College students. Thank you for listening to my thesis, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.